This is the Google Pixel 7. This is Google's latest addition to the Pixel lineup and also their latest attempt at making a phone that is basically a flagship device but at a much more reachable price point. $599 here in the UK for the 128GB version, and I've had my sim in this phone for about a week now and I've got some thoughts, so let's take a look. What's going on, guys? My name is Chris and welcome to the channel. So I've got the Google Pixel 7 here, but I actually had the Google Pixel 7 Pro. I pre-ordered it and I got it on release day, super buzzing to have it and try it out. And I ran into some issues in the first couple of days, especially with overheating. And ultimately I returned the phone because apparently it's a very common issue. So I then went online, did a bit more research, and according to a lot of people, users of the Pixel 7, that didn't have the overheating problem, at least not as bad as the 7 Pro did. So I've picked one up, I've been using it for about a week, and I can honestly say that that is not a big of an issue on this phone. It still does get warm to the touch sometimes. If you're doing anything a bit more graphic intensive, such as playing games or using the camera, for example, it will heat up, but I've not had it overheat once, and I've not got to the point where it's uncomfortable to hold in the hand where I did have that with the 7 Pro. So that's just something to take away straight away, that the Pixel 7 doesn't have the overheating issue from what I can work out right now. I'm dubious to how it's going to affect battery life and the CPU performance in the long term if it's going to constantly get warm, but like I said, I've not noticed any serious problems with overheating with this particular model. So firstly, we're just going to go through some specs real quick. I'm not going to take up too much of your time with the specs, you can find them anywhere online. Then I'm going to give you my overall opinion of the device, give some pros, some cons, and whether I think ultimately it's worth your money. So first and foremost, some specs. So firstly, in regards to build, we've got a IP68 water and dust resistance. Alongside that, we have Gorilla Glass Victus on the front, Gorilla Glass Victus on the rear, and then an aluminium shell all around the sides and back, obviously where this camera bump is. Very well built, feels nice and sturdy in the hand, no complaints there. On the front, we have a 6.3-inch Full HD AMOLED display running at 90Hz. Not quite the 120 that the 7 Pro is offering, but 90Hz, to be fair, still looks pretty damn good. And alongside the display, we do have that little hole punch cut out for the camera just at the top, dead center, which I think is probably the best place to have it if you're going to put it on the screen. It's worth mentioning as well, this phone does not have a headphone jack and also does not have expandable storage, so make sure when you're actually purchasing the phone, you pick up the storage option that's going to suit your needs the most. On the inside, we have the Google Tensor G2 chipset backed with 8GB of RAM, and with the model I have here for £599 is 128GB of storage. As mentioned before, it is non-expandable. So on the rear, we do have the two cameras on the 7. We have the 50MP wide-angle lens, which is 25mm equivalent at f1.9, and then we have a 12.2MP ultra-wide sensor, which is running at f2.2 aperture. We also have a dual LED flash on the back, and both cameras are capable of shooting 4K at 30 and 60 FPS. If you want some slow-mo action, you go around to 1080p where you can shoot 120 frames or 240 frames per second. We do also have stereo speakers on board, so we have a speaker that fires out of the bottom, and then we have one that fires out the earpiece at the top. Overall quality is not too bad, no real complaints, doesn't get overly loud, but the actual quality is pretty decent. So inside the phone, we actually have a 4,355mAh battery, alongside 20 watts of wired charging, which is a bit poor, if I'm honest with you, when there's phones out there pushing 120 watts, but anything's better than the standard 5 watts we used to get. And we've also got 20-watt wireless charging on board and reverse wireless charging if you do want to charge up your kind of Pixel Buds, etc. So let's talk battery life. I've been using this phone obviously for just over a week technically, and battery life has been fine. Not really had any issues. I do charge it wirelessly overnight every night, and that's charged completely fine. Battery life in the day has been good. Average probably at best, to be fair. I get through most days with about 20% left on just moderate use. On my heavier days, I have actually ran out at about 11 o'clock at night, got to like 1-2%, and that's to obviously bang it on charge then. But overall, I think it's passable battery life. Obviously, most people are surrounded by chargers, have power banks, etc. anyway, so it's not a massive concern, but it does, in general, get you through the full day. And let's talk processing power. Obviously, like I said, this is an in-house processor. It's not there to match Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 processors, but in day-to-day use, it runs perfectly fine. I've noticed no stutters, no slowdowns, no lags, animations all open and close just as quick as they should. Apps are just flawless. I've not noticed any real slowdowns at all. Now, when I've pushed some gaming through this phone, yes, that's when you see the biggest difference. You do have to start checking your settings, whether or not the graphics are set to medium, maybe high on some games, and obviously keep that frame rate high, between medium and high. Lastly, we look at the cameras. Cameras are fantastic. They're supposed to be. This is a Pixel device. It's meant to be a great photo taking machine. It is currently up there as #1 on DxOMark for the Pro model, but the only massive, real big difference between the two is obviously that telephoto lens and the slight macro abilities you can do with it. But this is a great phone for taking photos. I'm going to put some photos on the screen in a second so you can kind of sift through and have a look at, but you won't be disappointed. One thing I would say is the Auto HDR does go a bit aggressive sometimes in shots where there's a lot of dynamic range, and I think that is something that's happened in the Pixel 6 that kind of put me off using it, but it only happens every now and again. I'd say 95% of the time you're getting some very good usable shots. Low light's fantastic. Portrait mode, arguably one of the best in my opinion. And yeah, I think just using it in general as a smartphone camera, it does the job perfectly well, just as well as any top-end Samsung or iPhone would do. And lastly, we're going to look at the pros and cons of this device from my personal point of view. Honestly, I think performance is great day to day, but if you are looking at a phone that you want to do a bit more gaming on, or you do want to get quite graphically intense action on there, then I would recommend going elsewhere. But for the price point, I think performance is fantastic. I do think that the Auto HDR, as mentioned, is a bit too aggressive sometimes, and I think that needs fine tuning. And from my experience with Pixel's phones in the past, they can fine tune them with software updates and make them much, much better. So I do think this is something they can fix. The overheating issue, again, it's not really an issue for me on the Pixel 7. I don't find it a problem. Yes, after an hour or so of some gaming, it does get warm to touch, but most phones do that anyway when they're gaming, so it's not really a concern. Build quality, etc., all been fantastic. No real problems there. This camera bump here, this is a con because for two reasons. One, it collects dust like a vacuum. This will suck dust in at the top and underneath. And on this Snow model, it's not too bad because it hides it quite well, but you do see it. If you have the Obsidian version, for example, which I had the Pixel 7 Pro in, you can clearly see dust everywhere, and it was just really annoying having to clean all the time. The other annoying factor is getting in and out of jeans that are slightly tighter than most jeans, maybe like slim or skinny fit jeans. You do get caught on your pocket as you're taking it in or out, so it's just something to bear in mind. I don't see it as bad as the Pixel 6 was, but it's still something just to kind of keep in mind. I think if I had to pick all the cons, I would definitely say battery life would be ideally better. It's not where I want it to be as a daily driver, because I do want to have those more intense days that I don't think it's going to make it through the full day without having to bang it on charge somewhere. Auto HDR, as mentioned, ideally I'd like that fixed, which I think they can do. The camera bump with the dust and getting in that pocket, it's not going to be fixed in software update, unfortunately. This is a hardware thing. It's something you just got to either live with or just avoid. Ultimately, do I think this phone is worth a $599 asking price? Yes, 100%. If you're looking for a phone that's very clean Android, don't want to spend that £1,000 to £1,500 for a phone, you don't need all the bells and whistles, the best performance going, but you just need a solid camera, solid build, and just day-to-day performance to be spot on, then yes, this phone is definitely worth picking up. And I would actually advise getting the Snow version because I do think it looks quite cool. It's quite a striking design. And if I were to do one thing as well, I would go caseless. I've not had a case on this or a screen protector, and it's spotless. After a week and a half using it, not being kind of babying it around, just using it day to day in that pocket, put it on the side, picking it up. My son's been using it as well. No scratches anywhere, no marks, and it's held up really, really well. But thank you very much for watching, guys. I really do appreciate it. Please do hit that like button, hit that subscribe button to see more content from myself. I'm hoping to make more videos as we go, hopefully at one a week, mainly on smartphones, but I will look at tablets and cameras, etc. in the future. But at the minute, we're going to focus on smartphones. But thank you very much for watching. Really appreciate it. Cheers.